Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank God it's Friday, and I'm saying that from a sincere place. Today, we are going to be looking at a topic on HR Mentorship Learning Series, Standard and Precarious Workplace. And our facilitator for tonight is Mr. Paul Okeshino. Okay, Paul is an HR professional with over 5 years cumulative work experience spanning majorly the private sector. And he has worked in manufacturing, insurance, finance technology, and so on and so forth. He has a degree from University of Ilorin. We call that school better by far. I'm a proud alumni too. Okay, I hope Paul knew that. And he read business administration, and at the moment he's running his master's program at University of Lagos in industrial and labor relations. He's currently a people operations operation generalist in a fintech. Ladies and gentlemen, I hand over to Paul. Paul, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Yemi, for the introduction. And I would like to say it's nice to be here. And kudos must go to your administration and also your facilitators in terms of trying to improve HR within all facets of the industry we have in Nigeria. So I also want to say good evening, everyone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to HR professionals we have currently on the meeting. So today's topic is standard and precarious workplace, and you'd want to look at the fact that why this topic? This topic emanates from the fact that we have so many HR professions who have joined the HR mentorship group, and they've tried as much as possible to get understanding about the situation of their organization. And three things will come into play as we discuss. In a standard settings, when you are an HR in a standard settings, you'd want to look at the fact that you work as an HR in a standard organization. And more of the reason why is the fact that maybe you have a standard policy, but you do not understand these policies, or probably you do not have these policies at your fingertips. Another situation can come into play with the fact that you work in a standard organization and maybe your policy is obsolete. You tend not to improve or update your policy. And this policy tends to not go in line with what we have in the present day. And lastly, you might work in a precarious environment where there is no policy for you to make use of in terms of initiating policies and relating with people in the organization. So I will implore you to sit back and relax as we focus on more things we need to understand as regards the topic for today, standard and precarious workplace. And no man is an island of knowledge. So that is very, very important. So your add-ons would be also included. We can share ideas at the end of the session. Now, the topic, when we say standard and precarious workplace, we say standards to be a structured environment. We say standard to be a formal environment. And when we say precarious, in fact, I use the word precarious because when you look at the word precarious, you know you are in the wrong place. You know you are at danger. You know your employment is at risk when you are in a precarious organization. And precarious will connote informal organization. Precarious will connote non-standardized environment in lay terms. So my name is Paul Okeshino, and I'll be your facilitator for today. And without further ado, we'll just be moving to the key points we have for today. And we'll be digressing on this point and how it helps us as human professionals within our organization. Either you work as an HR in a standard organization or in a precarious organization. So ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the key point for today. So one of them is standard work versus precarious work. What do we connote by standard work? So by that understanding, standard work connotes full-time employment. And in most cases, you find people saying standard work can also be called permanent employment. It is not permanent because at some point, you tend to resign. You tend to, can be a cause of natural disaster, can be resignation, can be termination, can be dismissal within the organization. So all this deviates from the fact that the word we use in the settings are standard organization. And also in the precarious work, we have about 4 types of precarious work. In fact, it's also called informal type of work. And we connote them to be triangular, temporary, ambiguous, and part-time type of work in that settings. Also, the key point for today, we'll be looking at the standard workplace versus the precarious workplace. What do you do? What are the features of this workplace? And I can tell you for a fact that these 2 types of workplace, they deviate from each other. It's more like a twin, but they do not look identical. They look far different from what we tend twins to be. So within this workplace, some can be said to be a toxic environment, an organization without no structure, an organization without no rules that guides employment in the state. And the third point we'll be looking at today is the role of an HR in a standard workplace. What is your role as an HR in a standard workplace? As an HR in a standard workplace, your role is to improve the standard of the organization. And when you join a standard workplace, you tend to say, when you join such organization, then you say it's a standard, so there's no need to improve. Believe you me, as an HR professional, there's need to improve such standard because you have competitors and you need to shadow those competitors. You need to understand what they do in those organizations. And also we'll be looking at the roles of an HR in a non-standardized environment. What is the role of an HR in a non-standard environment? The role of an HR in a non-standard environment is to develop and implement policies. And under the HR mentorship series, we've seen clips of, for example, if you work in a precarious environment, you make use of clips like development and implementation of policy, starting HR from the scratch. All these are put together to improve your learning in a standard workplace. And lastly, we'll be looking at the factors that influence the use of the standard workplace. What are these factors? We've seen them everywhere. In fact, I can tell you for a fact that in a non-standardized environment, one of the key factors that made an employer to use a non-standard environment is unemployment, poverty, and so on. So all this we'll be talking today, all this we'll be discussing. We'll be explaining bit by bit on how we can use these tools to improve our workplace. So let's move to the next point, to the next agenda we have here. And the next agenda is to understand the meaning of standard. And when we say standard, we connote it to be a measure, a norm, a model for comparative evaluation. So when you have these things in place, you know that standard is of quality. It doesn't deviate from the word fake. When it's standard, then it's of importance to the organization to improve all sectors within the department. And also, standard organization or workplace is defined as an organization that has set rules and regulation. There is a definite hierarchical structure in a standard workplace. In this kind of organization, the tasks are carried out smoothly and efficiently. And lastly, the employer and the employees, they work together to achieve common goals, to achieve what we call organizational goals. What are these goals? Objective within the organization. So all this will have in a standard settings within the organization. Having said that, let's look at the means. Let's look at the type of work you have in a standard workplace. In a standard workplace is a transpose of what you have in your employment. And when we say it's a transpose, we're saying that in your employment, you have your offer letter. In that same employment, you have other benefits. So in a standard work, we have formal employment, that is your letter of engagement in a standard workplace. So in every workplace, if you do not have these, then you are at risk. In fact, you are in a precarious workplace because by nature, by legal structure, the formal employment or the legal engagement between you and the employer, it's what binds you and the employer. And we've had so many numerous cases. If you go to industrial courts today, you have different cases as regards employee versus the employer. And if you go through the industrial core website, you see names versus organizations who I do not even want to mention, so as not to spoil the image of such organization. And also you have a regular working hours in a standard setting. So in a standard setting, the working hours are in line with the regulation of the country. And under the labor law, it's stated clearly that an employee should work at 8 hours per day and 40 hours in a week. If that's in a situation whereby you work more, that means you're currently working in a precarious environment. And also you look at employee benefits. The employee benefits are numerous. Also, we have also statutory benefits that guides employer in the organization. And you look at statutory benefits like the NHIS, NHF, you look at NSITF, you look at group life insurance. These are statutory. These are within different acts that guides the employer in terms of giving benefits to the employees. And also you look at some other benefits that ranges from profit sharing, 13th month promotion bonus, performance bonus, and so on. So in a standard work, you would find this type of benefits, numerous benefits, because you want to gain competitive advantage over others. And also in a standard work, there is job security. When we say job security, we are saying that your job is secured. Your job is being covered by some factors. For example, if you resign in a standard organization, some organization will say they will pay you 1 month in lieu. That is when you terminate, when your employment is terminated. So there's job security in a standard work, and also the labor regulation. The regulation that guides employment in the states is within such environment. And lastly, within that cycle is social protection. So there's always a social protection in such environments. And when you look at social protection, we're looking at the Health Management Organization. We are looking at NSITF that covers injury in the workplace, to and fro from the workplace of the employees. And lastly, you look at group life insurance, which is a life assurance for employees within the organization. So all these are more like the facets of what you would have in a standard work, what you can see clearly in a standard work. And when you find a situation whereby you do not find all this in a standard work, that means it deviates from a standard organization. And that's why we term them as a precarious environment. So not to waste much time, we'll be looking at the standard organization, the standard settings. We'll be looking at the features that you should have in a standard organization. As an HR, what should you have in a standard organization? Our next slides cover the features of a standard workplace. The rules and regulation, the policies, the standard operating procedures, chain of command, division of labor, succession planning and promotion, culture, employee engagement, brand and strategy. All these will be picking one after the other, and we're going to be discussing more on this key points. Now, when we look at the rules that guides employment in Nigeria, and I do say this in numerous cases, that we as HR professionals in Nigeria tend not to read the labor law. And if you are in a unionized environment, then you use the Trade Union Act in conjunction with the labor law. The rules are the rules, and the labor law gives the minimum of which an employer should give to an employee. And without these laws that guides employment in the state or country, we would have a precarious environment. And in fact, these laws guide employee in the organization. You look at the cases of where you are in a standard organization and there are quite laws. For example, let's look at the labor law, what it states in section 18. subsection 1, that states all employees are entitled to annual leave. However, under subsection 1A, it states clearly that for individuals below 16, for individuals above 16, they have ranges of annual leave that they should be entitled to. So let's take, for instance, you are below 16. The labor law guides employment and states clearly that an individual who is under 16 should be given minimum of 12 annual leave, 12 days annual leave. However, if you are above 16 years, it stated clearly that you should give such individual in the organization minimum of 6 days leave. All these are written in the labor law. And sometimes you see HR professionals, when they go on trying to understand these laws, they deviate from these laws. They tend to not use the labor law as a guidance. And the labor law is just more of the minimum that we have in the country. Also, in a situation whereby you as an HR, you tend to deduct from employee salaries. In fact, the law frowns at it. Stated in section 5, subsection 1, the law states that in no way, in no situation must you deduct from an employee salary, either by fine. And it also makes references to the Trade Union Act, stating clearly that in a situation where you are unionized and you use a case study of the ASU strike, of course, you also look at the situation of the current public administration in the medical sector. All these are inputs through a unionized environment. And the labor law made mention of the fact that if you are in a unionized environment, such policy must be used. So when you go on indefinite strike, the TU Act, the Trade Union Act, states clearly that in any situation where employees goes on strike, then you are liable to deduct from such salary in terms of the number of days they've used within the organization. But in a non-unionized environment, the labor law frowns at it, clearly stated clearly. And when we find these things in the environment, it makes the environment toxic. And as a matter of fact, if you say you want to deduct from an employee's salary, and by deduction, the employee is not motivated to move on and come to work. Let's say, for instance, you deduct from an employee's salary and you keep on deducting. Such employee won't be motivated to come to that office space, because as a matter of fact, you are deducting. And I can say clearly that by deduction, you can either decide not to come to work because of this deduction. You can either to stay behind because of the fact that your remuneration is being deducted based on that. And you feel relieved because sometimes we face mental stress and there's need to take more rest. But as an HR, when you deduct from employee salary, this would be the situation you have in your organization. Also, you look at the regulatory bodies. If you work in the banking sector, you look at, you want to look at the CBN, the NDIC. If you work in the insurance settings, you look at NICOM. All these are regulatory bodies that guides the employer in such industry. Also, you look at ECA Act, that is Employee Compensation Act. You look at the NHF Act. You look at the NSITF Act. You look at the ITF Act. All these are there to guide you to make better decisions in your workplace. Now, let's move on. Let's see one of the things that we'd also want to understand in the standard settings. In the standard settings, you'll find what we call policy. This policy are more like an extract of the labor law. And this policy would shape your organization. This policy are made to shape your organization. And as a matter of fact, the policy had been created by the Human Resource Department, reviewed by the Legal Department, revised by the internal auditors or compliance, And at the end, will now be approved by the group managing director of the organization. That is the process of policy. And it's not something we can share easily. It's a confidential document. And when you see people, come to the group and discuss mainly of the fact that this policy, can I get a policy? Policies are confidential documents of an organization and must not be shared with a third party. In fact, when you go by your policy, it's stated clearly that these policies are there to guide either the employer or the employee. And also this policy are also called employee handbook in some settings. So this handbook are there to guide employees in the organization. When you have this handbook, you tend to make references to it in your organization. And in the standard settings, we tend to improve or update policy by contingencies, by a matter of circumstance. So policy are not implemented or improved just by, let's say, mercy of HR just bringing something to just put in the policy. A policy can be updated. In fact, you use a case study of the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought about the hybrid mode of work to Africa, because in the Western world, they've been using the remotes and also the hybrid work in terms of giving their employees these benefits. But COVID-19 created an avenue for us to make use of the hybrid mode of work and also the remote mode of work. And as a matter of fact, in this situation, now the economy has been trying to reshape to its normal level, and organizations were still switching back to the normal on-site work. This is a very big issue, because now, because of the removal of subsidy, organizations are resenting back to what we call the hybrid mode of work. So I think the new normal of work should come to stay, and we must also embrace this new normal of work in our policy, which form part of you gaining competitive advantage over other organizations in your industry. Also, we've seen situations whereby people discuss about queries. By standard, queries are there to get an input of an employee. Query is not a disciplinary action. Query is you requesting for information, for you not to make judgment of what you've had in your HR department. This judgment must be made from the employee and also who is reporting such employee, or through your investigation. So queries are there for you to find information about the situation in the organization. And in my group, I think we got a question whereby a professional was asking what next to do in terms of queries and so on. When we go by queries, there are timelines or deadlines to these queries. When we say timeline, a query should maximum last for 48 hours and minimum within 24 hours. And even when you share query with employees, you tell them to return back or to get back to return this query by close of business of that very same day, that is within 24 hours of business. So query is a different thing entirely. It's you requesting information from the employee to further improve your investigation. So when you have a standard policy in your organization, you have what we call a process, a system, and you're creating stability in the long run. And lastly, on this sector, you would see standard operating procedures. These are procedures for departments to go by to make sure that they go in line with the goals of the organization. Let's take, for example, the standard operating procedure for recruitment. The number one standard operating procedure in recruitment is to what? Fill the staff requisition form based on the request of the hiring manager. So the hiring manager must fill the staff requisition form must be signed by the team lead or the head of recruitment, approved by the group head corporate services. Final approval will now go through the group managing directors. So that is the work of standard operating procedures. These are procedures that go from department to department, inter-department, and some other departments which you interface with in your organization. That is the use of a standard operating procedures. And as an HR, you must liaise with managers in such departments to improve the standard operating procedures of the organization. And when you combine these three things, like the rules and regulation, the policy, the standard operating procedure, you tend to create what we call stability in your organization. That is, everything is implemented within your organization. And sometimes in a standard workplace, you tend to believe that since you work in a standard organization, there is no need for you to improve these things. Your work in a standard workplace is to improve, because you have competitors who are shadowing even your own organization in order to gain competitive advantage over your own organization. And you must be alert, you must be creative. Even if you are not, let's say, the team lead, maybe you are more of an associate, a specialist within the organization, your inputs are very needed in terms of implementing and developing these processes within the organization. So when you combine all these three things, we call it the foundation of a standard workplace. And these settings must be in a standard workplace, going from the rules and regulation, through the policies, through the standard operating procedures. We call it the SOP, to make sure that you get your job done easily and effectively. So when you create this at the foundation, you tend not to upset the system. You tend not to disrupt the system. In fact, when you have these things in your organization, believe you me, that is the foundation. That is you having some dealings at a get-go in the organization. Now, having made mention of this, we'll move on to where you must have a clear reporting line in your organization. It's important to have a clear reporting line in your organization. And that is where the chain of command or hierarchy comes in, the division of labor, succession planning, and promotion. When you have these key things in your standard setting, what it does is to create better communication in the organization. So without further ado, let's move on to the chain of command in a standard setting. How does it look like? Well, in some industries, let's take for example the banking industry now. There's what we call executive training in the banking industry. It's called the ET. From the ET, we have the ABO, Assistant Banking Officer. Then from the ABO, we have the BO, which is the banking officer. From the BO, we now have the senior BO, that is SBO, which is the senior banking officer, and so on through the deputy manager and so on. All these are connoted as chain of command in the organization, or we call it the hierarchical structure of an organization. In some client, we can have graduate trainee, executive, senior executive, deputy manager, assistant manager, manager, general manager, senior manager, and so on, by what the hierarchy states. And in fact, you look at what we call the organization organogram. And this organogram is more like a template of what you have in the organization. And when you have an organogram, it shows how the setup of these organizations are, from the group managing director to executive directors and downwards the organization. We also connote chain of command to be the pyramid of hierarchy in the organization. When we say pyramid, we are talking about the top level, the mid-level, and the lower level. And we connote the top level to be strategic. We say the middle level to be tactical, and we say the lower level to be operational in the organization. These are just the pyramid of what you have in a standard setting in an organization. So the reporting line goes in descending order, and coordinating will go from ascending order to descending order. let's take an hypothetical question where let's take an example of this chain of command, how it works naturally. So in a case whereby you work in an organization and an employee resigns, we say this employee is to be the predecessor of such role. In a situation where you bring someone to the organization, that is through recruitment, we tend to say this is the successor to such role. Now, let's go by instance now. In your organization, we call this to be cadre, we call it level, we call it grade, sometimes we call it title in some organizations. Some call it grade, some call it cadre. So that is what it connotes. Now, such grade goes from 500,000 naira net, that is the predecessor, the individual who is resigning from the organization, and a minimum of 600 naira net in the organization. And by recruitment, you are bringing someone in to man up that position. The position is stated to be, let's say, the team lead of reconciliation in your organization. In that situation, if you upset the system by not paying what is due to such employee, you are upsetting the hierarchical structure of your organization. Now, going by this example, remember we said it's an individual. We've not bring gender to this. So by that, when you bring this individual to the organization to act, let's say, as the team lead of that department, and through your succession planning, you've been able to see that, oh, you do not have people to become the successor to the predecessor that left the organization. So there is need for you to do your recruitment externally. So when you go by this situation, you must give to such individual what is budgeted for as that hierarchy has given to the predecessor. So if that band is stating 500 nets to, let's say, 800 nets, and the predecessor ends, while working with the organization, ends, let's say, 600 nets. And by interview, you receive what we call pre-interview questionnaire, where applicants fill this questionnaire by what they've done, the salary grade they currently earn, the salary grade they are expecting in the organization. Now, when such individual feels, let's take for instance, feels 300,000 naira net as a salary to join your organization and currently earns 150. In that situation, when you give that employee 300,000 naira net as against what you have in your HR budget, because when you go by resignation, that employee role has been budgeted for initially. So there's no need for you to say, oh, you're trying to like help the organization save costs. There's no need, because this role is budgeted for already. There's no need for you to upset the system. Now, moving on, when the successor takes up the role, and you tend to, because employees, they talk, they share ideas. And in fact, you would say in your policy that employees must not share what they earn. It's confidential. Believe you me, employees, they share all these things within themselves. And in fact, we say employees to be the mouthpiece of the organization. So when you share such information within the organization, and employees tend to see that they earn less more than what is being budgeted for. And even in that same department, there's an individual who received more than the team lead. So by communication, by directing and coordinating that department, in that situation, you have grievances, conflict, and employees will say, I currently earn more than my team lead. So in that situation, you are disrupting the hierarchy of the organization. And we've seen so many scenarios whereby you tend to now go to performance management to help you maybe promote such person to that cadre. So we need not to upset the system by hierarchy. We must give what is due to such role as budgeted in the HR budget. Now, when we look at this, we are trying to create an enabling environment in the HR department. And the HR department is more like the originator the origin of where all these things start from, when there is a misjudgment of communication within the organization, in most cases, is always the HR. And we're going to get there. Now, let's go by what we call division of labor, which is the next one on this communication line. So when we say division of labor, we are talking about cascading the goals and objectives through the organization. In every organization, there's what we call budgets and revenue session. In fact, what your organization did last year will be different from what they want to achieve this year. So by division of labor, there's distribution of labor from the ranking you have in the organization. So when you distribute labor in the organization, you share job tasks, you share skills, you share job specificity within the organization. And this transcends from department to department, cross-functional department within the organization. And when there's clear division of labor in the organization, then employees wouldn't complain at the fact that maybe some employees will complain that they are doing more than either the team lead or the manager. In fact, you see more of our contract staff complaining that they are doing more than full-time employees in the organization. So we need to understand the fact that there should be a clear division of labor in the organization. And this division of labor can constitute what we call a clear job evaluation in the organization by knowledge, skill, acquisition, years of experience, and so on. All this would improve the reporting line in your organization as regards cascading, these roles within the organization. And lastly, on this sect, we're going to be looking at succession planning and promotion. In every standard setting, in every organization, there is need to look at your succession matrices. And what constitutes these matrices are what we call performance profile of individuals within the organization. And within that performance profile, you would see educational background, skills, learning and development, number of years of experience within the organization, number of years of experience across all industries. And all this forms what you do in terms of your succession planning. These are the key inputs of what you have in your succession planning. So in the standard settings, there is need for us to look at the successors. And by what we call succession planning, we are trying to move up the ladder within the organization. And this improve employees to stay on the job. And we'll tend to differentiate between key talent versus talent in the organization. So that is what within the organization you would have in your organization in a standard settings. When you deviate from this, when you move away for trying to promote employees within the organization, create a good succession line in the organization, then there will be no hierarchy in the organization. And employees tend to say they've been on this role for about 4 years, no promotion, no succession planning has been done to even aid or improve them on the job. So when you have these key instruments, we call them to be a good communication line in the organization. Now let's go to culture. Culture forms, in fact, one of the biggest integral parts of the human resource we have today. When you have a good culture, it can make the organization better in so many ways. And we've seen in a situation whereby culture originates from the HR department, transcends to the top level management, and descends through other levels as stated in the chain of command or hierarchical structure of the organization. So when you look at culture in every organization, it's there to stay. It's one of the tools we use in terms of improving organizations, improving the culture within the organization. And when we say organizational culture, we look at the critical aspects of company success. Let's take, for instance, you as an HR in your organization, you tend to go by some norms, because we see culture to be norms, values, belief, cultural or ethnic belief within the organization. And when you go by culture, as an HR, you tend to create an enabling environment in the organization. So let's take an example now. Within the organization, it's been stated that, let's say the official language is English language, which has been stated in the policy. In fact, in every policy, you have English language as the official language of every organization, and stated clearly that should, in case you interface with stakeholders, customers, vendors, you can now communicate in their preferable language. That is the culture of the organization. And in a situation whereby you have other cultures like, let's say, for example, in your organization, you have a cafeteria or a canteen where you guys have your meal, that is either your breakfast or lunch in the organization. And within your culture, it's been stated clearly that no employee should have his or her meal at the workstation, at the work desk. And you as an HR, you currently have your meal on that desk. And employees tend to see that you currently do so. The employees will do the same because you are the convener of this culture. You are the naysayer of this culture. And not only the HR department, also the top level department, the line managers within the organization. So when you go by culture in the organization, is in conjunction of the managers, because the managers need to be aware of the culture of the organization, because it's what they do, subordinates would see in the organization. And you must be impartial. You must not create what we call a nepotistic environment in your organization. So in a standard settings, the culture must be well, firmly taken into action by the human resource department. And we also look at all forms, other forms like equity, inclusion, diversity in the organization. All these are also instruments to make sure that you do not have a toxic environment in a standard setting. When you go by what we call standard, it must be of quality within the organization. Now let's move on. Let's look at employee engagement. In every organization, the employees must be engaged in the organization. Employees must see the need, must see the drive for why they are always coming to the organization every now and then. When employees are not duly engaged, then there's an imbalance in the organization. In fact, employee engagement forms more like the interior design of your organization. And you look at engagement such as Father's Day, African's Day, Mother's Day, Children's Day. All this can be incorporated within the organization to make what we call staff bonding be implemented within the organization. When you have a disrupted environment in terms of employee engagement, then you tend to destabilize the organization. You tend to make a shift of the balance you've created from what we have in these features in the organization. And also you look at employee engagement from the fact that, after payment of salary, that is where, employees are motivated, employees are happy. So employees cannot be happy maybe once in a month. So that's why we have employee engagement there for us to see within the organization. So when employees are well engaged in the organization, it tends to foster an enabling system in a standard workplace. And you can create other team bonding, you can go TGIF, so thank God it's Friday. And if you go on LinkedIn, you see organizations in terms of creating all this awareness. And in your inner self, you want to join such organization because mere looking at this organization, you look at what they've done in terms of improving employee engagements within the organization. When employees are not well engaged, then there is, the stability in the organization. The organization tends to lose what we call zeal in terms of productivity in the organization. And you would want to agree with me with the fact that employee engagement starts from what we call the onboarding process. That is, when an employee joins the organization, what did you do as an HR? Did you bombard such employees with handover notes, meetings, Teams links, and so on to just get on with? You must find a suitable body for such employees within your organization. And that's why we say that employee engagement begins from the HR department. When you engage employees right from onset, right from the induction process, then the employee will feel comfortable, they'll feel at home in the organization. And lastly, we'll be looking at brand and strategy. So in every standard settings, there's what we call employer and employee branding. And you use an example of, when you join an organization, you see people go on LinkedIn and they tend to say, I joined this organization, and they take pictures of what they are being given in terms of the brand. You see laptop, you see a branded laptop bag, you see a branded lanyard stating the name of the organization. You'd see lapel pin, car key holders. You see it goes as having, let's say, air fresheners and so on, T-shirts, caps. All this is to brand such employee in the organization. And that is why we call it employee branding. It shows that you understand the situation of the employee. Imagine an employee joining your organization and you just gave the employee a laptop without a laptop bag, or you gave such employee more like no pen to jot things down, no notepad to jot things down in meetings, in interfacing with people who such employee needs to meet in the process of onboarding. So it's quite important for us to know all this as features that improve the organization in a standard settings. These features, you tend to tweak it from the rules. Like I said, the rules are more like the standard, the minimum at which the labor law has given. And it's left for the organization to improve the standard, to improve such rules in order to gain competitive advantage over your competitors or over others. So when you join all these key things together, when you join stability, communication, all this creates what we call a process within the organization. And as an HR, we must understand the fact that these features are key importance in a standard settings. So it's not just merely of what we have in the organization, but what we can do to improve the standard of such organization. And I also want to reiterate the fact that when you join a standard organization as an HR, it is your job to always improve the standard. And we go by what we call econometrics. We go by micro factors, macro factors that affect business as a whole. We have technology there. We have, in fact, we currently go by what we call fuel subsidy. All these are giving HR the understanding to implement some certain things within the organization. So these are one of the features of a standard work settings. And we'll be moving on to the role of an HR in a standard organization. What is your role as an HR in a standard organization? Now, let's understand that you as an human resource, or let's say the human capital development, must understand key points to keep improving the standard of such organization. And one of the key things you must understand is the 6 M's of management framework. The 6 M's are manpower, which is the human at work, money, that is HR budget, materials, machine, can be technology and so on, method, and the markets. and we call them to be, let's say, the market condition in terms of unemployment rates, mobility of labor, and so on. Now, but let's take them one at a time. Let's take them one at a time to understand how we can use this management framework to improve the standard of our organization. You see, in every organization we tend to be, we say that HR is the input of the organization. They would say HR is one of the key importance to bringing talent to the organization. Also, in the HR department of every organization, the recruitment is very, very important in the organization. And I can tell you for a fact that the recruitment department takes a large chunk in terms of productivity within the organization. Because without people in the organization, there will be no compensation and benefits. There will be no humans to pay salary. There will be no humans to conduct performance appraisal in the organization. There will be no people to put on learning and development in the organization. So we tend to create these things for recruitment. And that's where we have talent, our key talent. And when we go by what we call the features, as aforementioned stated, these features create what we call talent pool for the organization. When you have set rules and regulation within the organization, you have a standard policy that goes in line with the best practices. When you have the standard operating procedures, when you have a coordinated hierarchical structure in your organization, when you have division of labor, succession planning, promotion, culture, employee engagement, brand and strategy, what you do is the fact that you've created a talent pool in the organization because your employees are your mouthpiece. Is what you do in the organization, your employees would share to the outside world. And that is why in some standard organizations, they tend not to, go maybe outsource some role because they believe that their brand can help them to bring key talents to the organization. And we don't want to start mentioning names here. You will have the big four who can easily gain or bring talent to the organization because of the brand they've created for themselves, because they've been able to weigh other competitors. They've been able to look at what the competitors are doing, what their competitors are doing in their organization. That is what we call strategy. By doing research of other organizations in your industry, inter-industry, intra-industry in the organization. And when you do this, you tend to, like I said, create enormous talent pool. There are some organizations whereby, in fact, when they post out jobs out there, either by LinkedIn, either by posting job sites and so on, maybe on social media, within 10 minutes, they have enough CVs to review for that role. It's because they've been able to brand themselves, and employees have been able to also make mention of what they've done, of what they've implemented in the organization, and the manpower plan. So we need to understand that recruitment carries a whole lot in the organization. To differentiate between talent and key talent in the organization is very, very important. And the recruitment process must not be nepotistic, must not be biased. As a matter of fact, it must be plain within the organization. Now, money. When we talk about money, we're saying that in every HR department, there's what we call HR budgeting. It can be budget for trainings, learning and development, can be budget for the whole organizational compensation, can be budget for even the machine and the materials that you need to get your job done in terms of reaching high level of productivity within the organization. So all these are put in together to help you give what we call a management framework in the HR department. Now let's look at materials and machine. We look at this from what we call the technology advance that we've had over the years. The inclusion of what we call artificial intelligence, the inclusion of HR automations, the inclusion of automated things we've had in HR department nowadays. Of course, they help to improve productivity in your organization. Also, they have their own disadvantages also. So, but what we are saying here is that the material needed to improve your HR department or the machine needed to improve the HR department is quite important. And that is where we have like dashboard, HR dashboard. In fact, in my own organization, we automated the leave portal, we automated performance appraisal in the organization. All this to help us reduce paperwork and improve productivity in the HR department. Some organizations use automation to automate their recruitment process, even compensation and benefits within the organization. All these are material to help you improve within your standard organization. And we can name so many. We have seamless HR and so on to help you do your recruitment and so on. But however, there are dangers to the materials we use in HR department, especially when you are a rookie or when you are just starting your career in HR, because the manual process in HR is important. It's very, very important for HR professionals to understand the manual process of the organization. And it is quite important for us to know this process. We've seen series of interviews whereby you interview an HR professional and you ask them, what is the recruitment life cycle or what is the recruitment process? And they tend to say, oh, in my own organization, we do not use this process. What we use is seamless HR, you know, other automations to help improve the department. And these things are quite key to help us in our knowledge, because it's what we do on a daily basis that we would understand, that we would want to improve on. Let's say, for example, you automate, let's say you automate compensation and benefits in your organization. And you're going for an interview and you're being asked, what are the deductions? What are the statutory deductions? You tend not to understand some of them when you go into the technicalities of this deduction within the HR function that you have under compensation and benefits. So what we are saying here is the fact that materials needed in the HR department, the machine you need to get your job done in the HR department is important. We are not saying it's not, but it's also very important to understand the origin of such process, the manual process of learning and development, of compensation and benefits, of recruitment, of performance appraisal, and so on. And lastly, okay, before that, we'll be looking at the methods of the 6 M's also in the HR. What are these methods? Might be management style, might be the way you tend to create an enabling environment, all just to improve the standard of the organization. And lastly is the market forces, which you and I do not have control over. They are numerous, and that is why in the next in the next point, we'll be having person analysis as one of the forces. We call it the macro forces that affect business, that affect human capital development in the organization. So person analysis. You see, person analysis emanates from the word business, because business cannot be static, because business cannot exist in a vacuum. So there are players to business. In fact, we say clearly that even the policies we have, these person analysis are one of the major contributions, are one of the major circumstances to help us to improve our policy. Within this person analysis, it creates what we call an understanding of what we call business acumen within the organization. So let's take them one after the other. Let's take the person analysis. So the person analysis is connoted to be political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. These are factors that affect the business. These are factors that could mar the organization. Now let's take them one after the other. We might want to look at the political scene. in the organization, or let's say in the political scene, there's what we call precedents. What has happened before can also be used in the court of law. And you want to lay references of what have happened in far back, maybe let's say through the industrial courts, or let's take, for example, even the one we have currently under the tribunal currently in the country, trying to find a solution to the election process we had in February this year. These political factors can create a system whereby you need to mitigate as soon as possible. And during the election, we can see where organizations enforced what we call a hybrid mode of work as soon as possible, so as not to allow in any situation employees to be in danger, even the organization as a whole to be in danger, because during those periods we know the havoc that's being caused across political parties and so on in the country. Also, we also look at laws, like we've stated clearly, the labor law. We look at employment regulations, we look at immigration, we look at policies, we look at government stability, we look at political events that has happened within such time frame. You can also use a case study of the sit-at-home rule in the Southeast or the South-South. The sit-at-home, I think, is mainly on Mondays in such area. What did you do as an HR when you have your branches in such environment? It's very important for you to always give the necessary assistance to such individuals, to such employees in your organization. And it's just now that we can hear that the sit-at-home has been lifted and everybody can now go dealing with their daily activities Mondays now in the Southeast or the South-South. So all these are political inputs that we must understand within an environment. Now, economical factors, which is always the huge situation we have. Let's take, for instance, let's take as a case study of the economical factors we have today. You look at the floating of naira to dollar. You look at the removal of fuel subsidy. What have you done as an HR in your organization? And you've seen HR professionals tend to seek understanding on the need or what they need to implement as soon as possible. Believe you me that salary increase is the last stage of what you need to implement within the organization, because as an organization, you have what we call product and services. As far as those products and services are yet to be improved in terms of the pricing, then you might want to look at this system before making a decision to the, let's say, the board or the group managing director in terms of increasing staff salary. And you cannot look at some organization in contrast in differences in terms of your own organization. For example, we've heard that the banking, some banks have been able to improve staff salary within their organization. Also, you might want to understand the financial cycle of such organization also. This will help you to also improve your decision-making in terms of salary increments in your organization. But however, in this such situation whereby you have, in fact, it started with fuel scarcity, then it goes about to removal of fuel subsidy by the present administration. One of the things you can implement is probably a public transport, transportation system for your employees. Also, you want to look at the hybrid or the remote work model to be put in place by the HR department. When employees tend to see all these things, they believe that you have their situation at heart, you consider them. And one of the key things we are failing to understand is the fact that the HR too, we are also employees within the organization. In fact, we don't want to say it, but we also want salary to be improved. But by what we call personal analysis, we need to understand that some factors can hinder the increment of salary. So further discussion can be made across what we have with like the finance department in terms of to check the revenue of the organization as at present day and use the precedent of what you had last year to make better decision in terms of this economical situation in the country. So it's quite very important for you to understand that these factors can make or mar any organization. So it doesn't resent to only a standard organization. It also go as far as precarious organization, precarious settings, precarious workplace in Nigeria as a whole. Also, we look at social factors. One of the social factors that, like I said, is more like culture, inclusion, diversity, equity, equality in the organization. And you must not be biased. And that's why when you go out there and you see job description, and at the end of the day, it's been stated clearly that this job role is mainly for female. That is to create a gender balance in that department. That is the stride the HR department wants to follow. And so when you go by the social factors, you want to look at the culture of the organization. What can you implement? What can you improve on? What can you improve in terms of diversity, in terms of discrimination? Of course, the discrimination part, we must say no to discrimination can be maybe, for example, we have, I think I read in my own group yesterday where an individual was stating clearly that in such case whereby we have HIV/AIDS as an employee within the organization, under the Discrimination Act, it's been stated clearly that you must not discriminate such employee. In fact, you must create an enabling system for such employee in terms of getting retroviral drugs for such employee within the organization. That is what the law states. And for every situation that happens in line with that, you must also inform the Minister of Labor of such situation in the organization. So all these are social add-ons to improve a standard settings. Also, we look at the technological factors. These factors, like I said, are going in rapid space. In fact, it's vast in the country currently. Some would say it has improved productivity. Some would say it's going to take humans, it's going to take the jobs of employees within the organization. And we've seen clearly where even all these social media giants are, laying off staff, all because of the improvement of technology across the world. And the addition of AI has been very important. And I can tell you that AI improve productivity on the job at all levels. But on a larger scene, AI is not a pilot. AI is a co-pilot. So we need to understand that it's the prompt we send to AI that we get in reply. So it cannot act on its own. It cannot function on its own. So the AI still needs our input. So as an HR, I use AI almost now and then, because it's helped me improve in terms of what I need to know, in terms of the processes, in terms of what I need to implement, what I need to improve in my organization. So we must also bring in technology to help us improve the HR department. And you go by what we call automation also, cybersecurity, data protection. In fact, the Data Protection Act is being just signed by the present administration of the country. That is the present president of the country in terms of data protection. I've had it in my policy, I think, since 2022, during the post-COVID era, because within that COVID era, there's what we call data. Data was everywhere. And so there was need for us to, shield employees, shield customers of the organization. And this data protection will help us to protect stakeholders, to protect employees, to protect customers. Because when data is being shared in a wrong manner to a third party, then there's problem within the organization. And you look at it from the aspect of sometimes you get all these text messages that you did not apply for, can be maybe loan apps, can be, let's say, all these scams, is because your data has been infiltrated, because someone somewhere have shared your information within such system. So there is need for us to have what we call data protection policy in our HR policy, as far as we are in this current century. And also we'll be looking at the legal factors. And like I said in the previous slide, the legal factors is more like the labor law, and labor law tends to be the minimum that you must have. In fact, while I was a rookie, while I was trying to understand what we call the HR profession, this policy are in PDF format, some can be in Word format. So anytime I go home and I tend to face traffic, I just bring out my phone, I tend to read these policies, rules, can be Employee Compensation Act, can be labor law, can be Trade Union Act. All this would improve your decision-making in a standard setting, in a standard organization. So we need to understand the law. And it's one of the reasons why employers nowadays will want someone who has what we call a legal setting or a legal background, or must have studied law in one place or the other, to man up their maybe employee relation, or let's say the HR department. Because as an HR professional, we do not understand the law. Even if we do understand the law, we do not tend to interpret the law as necessary. And in most cases, we are quite safe. Let me just use that word, because employees are ignorant of the law. In fact, majority of our population, in terms of the employment population, do not know these laws. In any situation whereby they tend to understand these laws, then believe you me, the industrial courts will be filled by now. So we need to understand these laws to help us improve our decision-making in the organization. And lastly, we'll be looking at the environmental factors, and we consider these factors to be practices or environmental regulation across the world. And we can use a case study of COVID-19 pandemic as an environmental factors. It shook the world. In fact, in the Western world was thinking probably is going to affect Africa the more, but we were able to withstand such situation. And in a standard setting, in a standard workplace, you've seen that your job is secured. In some settings, in some organizations, they were able to, like, okay, let's reduce staff, let's try to lay off some staff. But at the long run, when the economy came back to normal, they were able to call back the same staff to the organization. So all this we must understand as human resource specialists, generalists within all facets that we currently practice in such organization. So when we identify all this, we tend to make it as an opportunity to improve the standard of our organization. And like I said, in a standard organization, an HR is being recruited to improve the standard of such organization. We need to do research. You need to look at what organizations are doing. And as a matter of fact, I think I saw an organization that even created a month more of what we call the maternity leave, because by law, the maternity leave is 12 weeks at the beginning, and I think 6 weeks or 12, okay, I think it's I think that is 6 weeks at the start and 6 weeks after giving birth. But some organizations have been able to create more policies around it. I know of an organization that gave 1 month free also, to make it 4 months maternity leave in the organization, and also tends to put the dependent in a crèche facility, so as to make sure that such employee is well focused on the job. So all this can be implemented, all this can be improved on within the organization. Also, on the point, you need to update, review, and revise the policy that you have within the organization. If you have a policy as far back as 2016, believe you me, your policy is obsolete as what we have in our current world in 2023. You have policy, new policy going back, political affiliation, data protection. Look at policy going around disciplinary action, leave administration, and so on. All these policies are meant to improve the standard of such organization. And like I said, also to improve the culture of the organization. And culture is a very, very important factor within the organization. When there's absence of culture, employees tend to say such environment to be a toxic environment, to be an environment whereby it's not enabling for employees. And we must understand the fact that this culture, our values, our beliefs, culture is not a written rule, but however, is what you've implemented in the organization. So you must be firm with the culture you've implemented in the organization, equity in the organization, inclusion also. So every individual must be included in the organization through a clear communication, or what we call a clear reporting line. And lastly, improve employee engagement. When you engage employees every now and then, they tend to understand that they are in a sane environment. And you look at, let's say birthdays, giving birthday wishes and birthday cakes in terms of to improve their engagement, to improve their zeal towards work. Also, you look at engagements like staff bonding, can be quarterly, can be biannual. So all these things are there to help you engage employees within the organization. So these are the rules of the HR in a standard workplace. And all these things can help us to shape our workplace in terms of what we have in the current century, and also to create competitive advantage over others within same industry or outside such industry. So having understand the role of an HR in a standard workplace, let's move on to the precarious workplace. A workplace people have said to be a toxic environment. People would say such environment is not enabling because of the kind of structure that is being implemented in such environments. So work with me as we go on to the next slide, and we tend to see this type of workplace. Now, precarious is also connoted to be a non-standardized environment, or what we call informal environment. And we connote them to be not average or usual, not of form that is acceptable as standard. Like I said, it deviates totally from the standard organization. And what we have in a standard organization is the rules, the policies, the hierarchy, the culture. But in a precarious organization, you have minimal of this within such organization, within such workplace. A non-standard employment refers to a work arrangement between an employer and employee that deviates from the standard employment, and also not securely held in position, dangerously likely to fall or collapse, or uncertain. So when you join such organization, you know you're at risk initially. In fact, the terms of engagement, you see offer letters being sent as a text message in a precarious settings. And in a precarious settings, you see individuals, they report that I do not have an offer letter. And recall that we said the offer letter is what binds the employer and the employee legally. So in any situation whereby you do not find the environment wanting, or let's say there is one thing the employer has done that doesn't go in line with the regulation, that means you have nothing in concrete agreements to say that such thing can be taken to the industrial courts. So all these are the reasons why we say that it is precarious. And by that word, it means it's dangerous, it's toxic. Now, moving on, let's look at the type of work under the precarious settings. We have 4, and we connote them to be temporary, we connote them to be triangular, ambiguous, and part-time type of work under the precarious mode settings. So type of precarious employment. First, we have the temporary, like I said, and sometimes in our organization or in different organizations, they connote them to be contract staff. That is, they have a contractual agreement within the organization. We set this type of employment to be an informal type of work, a non-standardized type of work, because it doesn't carry all the benefits you should have in a standard organization. In a standard organization, you have numerous benefits. However, in a precarious setting, in a precarious organization, in a non-standard organization, you tend to have minimal benefits. In fact, in some scenarios, you have no benefits. All you just get is your salary, and that's all. So in a precarious employment, the temporary employment is of agreements in terms of contractual agreements with an employee. And we go by contractual by saying that, okay, your contract is within 6 months, your contract is within 12 months. All these are one of the reasons why we say temporary employment to be a precarious mode of work, because at any point in time, your contract can be terminated without due notice, without benefit that goes in line with termination of employment. In a standard setting, it's only when you are summarily dismissed in the organization, that's where you tend not to get all the benefits accompanied with your role in the organization or accompanied with the grade you have in such organization. But in a precarious settings, nothing of such. In fact, you can also have a precarious work in a standard settings. So that means in a standard organization, you hear this individual is a contract staff. Such person is holding what we call a precarious mode of work in the organization. Also, we look at triangular employment. That is, it's more like the arrangement of an agency. It's like an outsourcing function. Since you know that you are not well equipped to pay such employee all the benefits, you tend to outsource it. You do not want to face so many reaction or action from the employee. Hence, the need for you to now go on to outsource this role within the organization. And that is why we call it triangular employment. It's involved the arrangement of the parent and the outsourcing company that does all the recruitment process, all the payment of salary of such individual. And in that sense, if such employee is being terminated in the organization, the employee is being sent to the outsourcing organization to further report to such organization. Also, we have ambiguous employment. What we mean by ambiguous employment, we mean by sole entrepreneurship. In fact, it's one of the most worst situations in terms of precarious environment, because there's nothing like the law in such environments. There's nothing like statutory deduction, addition. Within such employment, salaries are being paid, can be in cash, can be more like a transfer within an individual to the employee. And we tend this to be one of the type of precarious environments whereby it's deviates from the standard environment. And since it's a sole proprietorship, it's one-man business, can be managed in any circumstance the sole proprietorship wants to take on the job. And lastly is the part-time employment. So the part-time employment can also be stated that, okay, you have some hours of work and some hours to stay behind work, not to come to work. I would term this to be a situation whereby the employees work within some certain working hours in the organization. It's commonly in the security agency, janitorial services, and so on. And when you look at this type of employment, it's a situation whereby employees in such employment moonlight. That is, they tend to have what we call multiple job holdings in every facet of where they believe they can also work within that time frame. Take, for instance, the security that guards your organization comes in on Monday. On Tuesday, you do not see such security. That means such security is a part-time employee of maybe an outsourcing organization and tends to report to another place, also just cover and make sure that they get enough remuneration to improve their standard of living. So we call part-time employment to be such employment that allows what we call moonlighting or multiple job holding. So in a standard employment, these are the four major categories of employment we have in a standard setting: the temporary employment, the triangular employment, the ambiguous employment, and lastly, the part-time employment. So moving on, we'll be looking at the features of a precarious employment. The features, what you would have in a precarious employment. Why do we say these things to be precarious, non-standardized? Let's move on to the next slides. So non-standardized or informal or precarious employment, we say it to be a toxic environment. And these are the features of what you would have in a non-standard environment. And first is a non-standard contract. Like I said, the terms of employment in such environments is not having any legal backing within the laws that guides employment in the country. And we use a case study of the labor law. When you go by the labor law, you look at the first line that says employment contract, how it's being done. Precarious work deviates from such rules, because by all understanding, in a non-standard contract, you do not have any legal backings. And when you go to the industrial court, in fact, the first thing the lawyer will tell you, where is your employment letter? Where is your letter of engagement? Where's your offer letter to help us move further with such case? And as far as that is absent in your organization or as an employee in an organization, you are at risk. That means at any point in time, the employer can say, I think you can go, you can move on. We no longer want you in such premises. Next is the unpredictable or irregular working hours. In a precarious environment, in a precarious setting, employees work in different hours. Of course, they will say their employment is 8 to 5. But at the end of the day, you see that you spend more hours at work, all because there is no clear communication line in terms of giving what we call division of labor. And you see some people work overtime, some people work extra hours in terms of to get the job done. Also limited benefits. In a precarious work model, there are limited benefits. For example, you look at the statutory perks you have, the statutory deduction, the statutory addition by your employer. It's not there in a precarious environment. It's absent in the precarious environment. And we need to understand that when you join such organization, when you join such settings, all these are absent, like the pension, the group life insurance. In fact, you do not have extra perks like the 13-month salary, the performance allowance, and so on. All these are absent in such environments. Also, we have job insecurity. Your job is not secured. Based on external forces, then this tends to create your job in a situation whereby you yourself, you're not rest assured of the situation of things. And in the precarious settings, during the pandemic, most of them closed down. They shut down because they could not operate at the optimal level as of such in the standard settings. And lastly, you have fewer labor regulation. In fact, there is no labor regulation because they tend not to pay taxes, pay pension. In fact, they do not register the organization for pension. So all these are within the precarious environment, and we must try as much as possible to do our findings. And one way we do tell people trying to join an organization is the fact that when you join an organization, there is need for you to ask about the culture, the benefit associated with that role, for you to have a clear picture of the organization you're about to join. Let's move on to the next slide, where we have limited skills. So because we run a non-standardized environment, you see the skills of such employees being, because you do not want to employ people who are over-experienced or who are well experienced in other standard settings. Also, we look at informal hiring practices. The informal hiring practices that they do, you look at, sometimes you go for interviews and you sit down for quite numbers of hours. Sometimes the interview will be rescheduled. It's because they have what we call an informal hiring practices. Also, you look at the job description they send out there. Some you'd see HR manager, and you see salary at 120 net salary for an HR manager. So job evaluation is not carried out in a precarious setting. So they just share job description to make sure that they get some people to just come and have the interview. And once they have the interview, they discuss salary, and which is minimal. And that's where low wages comes in. So in the precarious settings, there's low wages, low benefits, and also limited social protection. There's nothing like NSITF, nothing like group life insurance, nothing like HMO, Health Management Organization, that you have in standard settings. And we say NSITF to cover injuries between the workplace and to and fro from the workplace. And we say group life insurance is a life assurance for employees within the organization. And these things are absent within such organization. And lastly, government oversight. So because they perform what we call precarious environments within the sector, the government tends to just let them be. And one of the rules that's been stated nowadays is the ITF. The ITF stated clearly that minimal 25 employees within the organization should not register for for ITF. However, if you are more than 25 in your organization, then there's needs for you to register your organization for industrial training fund. And all other things like that, like the NHF, like for example, the NHF has been able to revoke private sector from contributing to the act. So more like it's no longer important for private sectors within Nigeria. So all these are one of the features that you would have in an informal setting, in a non-standardized setting, in a precarious settings that you have in the country. And now let's look at the factors that influence the use, or let's say, as an HR, how can you implement policies or develop policy in a precarious settings? So as an HR in a non-standardized environment, the role of an human resource or human capital or profession is depending on the specific context and need of the organization. And like I reiterated, we talked about pestle analysis. This doesn't only associate with standard organization, is also associated with precarious organization, non-standardized organization. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the two both parties need to understand, because they are beyond your control. This analysis is beyond the control of the HR in every organization. And we've made mention of the political factors, the economical factors, the social factors, the technological factors, the legal factors, and the environmental factors. And we'll look at compliance. As an HR in a precarious settings, there is need to comply to the laws that guide employment in the states. You can take it step by step. It's not something that will be easy for you to go by, but when you meet them in person, they'll help you to tell you the certain things you need to get done to comply to the rules that guides employment in the state. The first step is to get your CAC certificate in terms of registering the business. In the precarious settings, some business just operates just like that. And that is why we say that in a precarious settings, we can have the ambiguous type of work in a precarious settings. Also, policy development. In a precarious settings, it's very, very hard to develop policy because there is none already. And so the best way to develop this policy is to take it little by little, is to seek understanding from expatriates, from people who have become HR professionals within their career. And policy is not something that we share, it's something that is confidential to the HR department. So developing policy, you develop policy by leave administration, you can develop policy by disciplinary action. You just have to set up something, a blueprint for your organization to follow. So by setting up a policy, like I said, under the HR mentorship series, we've had development and implementation of policy. We've had starting HR from the scratch. All these tools will improve you to create a policy within your organization. Also, talent acquisition, the way you acquire talent. Like I said, because you work as an HR in a precarious organization, in a non-standard organization, doesn't mean you should not understand what we call by job evaluation. And by job evaluation, we connote them to be the knowledge, the skill, the acquisition, the number of years of experience such individual has been able to gather. And there's need for you to attract talent within such premises. So if you work as an HR in a non-standard organization, there is need for you to improve the acquisition of talent in the organization. And also you want to look at job evaluation. So you need to evaluate jobs. So, you know, we've seen so many scenarios whereby we have different job description. You see HR manager, 80,000 naira. All this is because in such settings, there's absence of good job evaluation. And by understanding the job evaluation goes as far as you understanding what you need for such role. That is the job description. And the job description will carry from the skills, the requirements, the educational background of such employee or such applicants in your organization. And lastly, we're going to be looking at employee engagement. Because you work in a precarious environment, do not mean that you should not engage your employees. Even the minimum, celebrating birthdays, numbers of years of employees within the organization, milestone within the organization, 5 years, 10 years, celebrate them. Let them feel that they are included in the organization. Can be a staff bonding, going to games, the cinema, having lunch with the team. All these are implementation to improve your employee engagement in the organization. So all these are the role of an HR in a precarious settings, in a non-standardized environment. And we need to understand that these things are very important in terms of trying to develop a system to put something in process. And the process will start from the stability that we have stated in a standard settings. Having discussed the role of HR in a standard settings, now let's look at the factors that made an employer to choose to use a precarious environment, to use a non-standardized settings. And first is the labor market condition. As a country who has over 33.3% unemployment rate and poverty rate is at 12.3%. All these are conditions that have made employers to make use of the precarious setting because they believe that majority are unemployed and they would want to jump on anything you offer them in the labor market. Also, you have mobility of labor. Also, you have globalization and outsourcing. In terms of globalization, we say that urbanization leads to industrialization. And however, industrialization leads to globalization. So when you work in such environments, you see people migrating because of, the system that is not working in the present situation of the country. And it's a critical factor that we need to address in this same climate. And when you have mobility of labor, where you have your skilled employees, your key talents moving to another country to gain employment, it means that the environment is not conducive enough for them to work in. In fact, we say this environment not to be enabling for them in the country. Let's take, for instance, you close by 5 p.m. and you're trying to try as much as possible to get home, and you spend 4 hours while in traffic, all just to, get home as soon as possible. So when there is no enabling environment in terms of the external forces, all this would affect or make an employer to use what we call a precarious settings. Also, industry and markets. So the industry and markets, when we say industry and markets, we're trying to say the certain industries such as tourism. You look at industries like construction industries. All these industries have more of precarious work in their employment, because you have more of factory workers, you have more of employees who are prevalent to the precarious work and do not need what we call a contractual agreement between the employer and the employee. So all these are one of the reasons why employers use a precarious model to run their organization. Also, the regulatory framework. I think the only regulatory framework that we see that is working is, let's say, the FIRS or the LIRS in terms of, taxing employees in Nigeria. And as far as it's bringing revenue to the states, to the country, they take it as serious as possible. So when we improve in the regulatory framework we have, then it will make employers not to use such work model, that is the precarious work model, and make them to go more of joining, looking at the labor law and seeing how to improve employees within the organization. Also, corruption is also one of the reasons why employers have been able to use what we call precarious settings. In such situation, corruption is, in fact, it's almost like a leading factor, because you can bribe your way out from all these regulatory bodies. And when you pay some fine, when you find your way within that system, when every system is corrupt, then it will make an employer to use what we call a precarious settings. When you find your way in terms of you, let's say, for instance, Lagos State government comes to do some check and balance in your organization, and you meet them and say, oh, let me just find my way, let me pay you guys off. I know I do not adhere to the rules and regulation that guides employment, but this is how my setting is. So all these are factors that influence the use of a precarious settings. And also poverty, like I said, poverty is also a tool that would make such organization to use a precarious setting. And lastly, insufficient resources. So insufficient resources can also make use of a precarious settings in that way. And so when you use, when the employer do not have a sufficient resource to either pay some regulatory bodies in terms of remittances, taxes, they tend to use what we call a precarious setting within the organization. So ladies and gentlemen, that would be all for me, as we've come to the climax of today's series. If you have any question, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul.
That was excellently delivered. Because of time, we would just like to two or three need to be out of here in 7 minutes or less. That was an excellent presentation. Do you have a question? If you raise hands, we will be able to there are any questions or remarks you may want to quickly respond to quickly. If you would like to ask a question via, raise your hands quickly. If you don't, we will assume we are fine. Okay, so I see Adorable. I've enabled you to unmute. You have the floor, Adorable. Adorable, you can unmute, please.
Okay.
How do you? Good.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Loud and clear. Go ahead, ma.
Okay. Good evening, sir. Thank you, Mr. Paul, for that excellent presentation. It was really insightful, and my book is full. So there's a question I want to ask, and you explained that precarious workplace, like where they mostly contractual, right? Yes, that's what I use, contractual. So, and you say most of them don't get benefits and all that. So for some contract workers who, receive their 13th month salary, HMOs, their, pension, where do under what category do we place those kind of contract workers? I mean, they don't get the full benefits as full staff, but they get few benefits. So are they still under standard or under precarious situation? Thank you.
Okay, they are still under precarious settings. And here is why. It's because in a standard organization, the perks that you have in such organization doesn't stop there. And I made mention of the fact that we have profit sharing, we have promotion. Such staff are not promoted in the organization because they are being termed to be contract staff. Such staff do not follow the due process in terms of the hierarchy of the organization, do not follow the promotion line of the organization. And in a standard settings, we have so many perks, even non-monetary perks like award and recognition, like paying subscription for employees in terms of certification. All these are not, these employees do not, tend to gather all this as a perk. So the only perk they can have is pension, 13th month, is because such contractual workers work in a standard organization. So they tend not to create a diversity. So they tend to extend these perks to them. So that is why in some cases, we say that a contractual worker also has what we call a precarious work in its hand. So there's need for us to understand all these facts. And you would agree with me that in a standard settings, there are numerous perks. And I can tell you that the HMO for a full-time employee of that same organization is different from what you have as a contract staff. In fact, going by HMO, the employee would say that in such situation, he or she cannot use some platform under the HMO. However, a full-time employee can gain access to all these facilities. So there are some perks that are there from the employer through to the employee. All these individuals do not tend to gain these perks within themselves. So it's more like a statutory perk, and it's majorly NHF, pension, and 13th month. That is where it stopped. And some contract workers don't gain more of, okay, you can't promote a contractual employee. That's a fact. In fact, contractual employee must go through the process of recruitment to be able to gain full-time employment in some standard settings. And we have them numerous, especially, in fact, the convener of this type of work are more of the banking sectors. They created this model because they have what we call a larger workforce for them to deal with. And since they cannot be able to deal as soon as possible, so they tend to extend some roles for outsourcing, or let's say a contractual agreement between the employee and the employer.
Thank you so much. All right, because we also run a standard webinar and not a precarious one, we need to end right away so that you can rest and prepare for tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, latest by tomorrow, this will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. In case you don't know our YouTube channel, just look for Oluyemi Adeosun. You'll find tonight's recording and well over 160 recordings there. We also have 2 great webinars tomorrow, one at 5:30, another at 7, and on Sunday, another one by 7:30 p.m. All occasional. This has been excellently put together, great slides, great presentation, great explanation. You will surely be back. We'll chat offline. Ladies and gentlemen, this is real. Thank God it's Friday. Please get some rest. Stay fit for the weekend. Good night, everyone. Cheers.